in this video, I want to prove to you why your speed or your level of speed is entirely determined by your genetics, okay? Now, in order to really fully understand this video, one thing that's going to help is actually refer to my last week's video on the speed-strength continuum, okay? So that you can have a better understanding about this continuum. I'm also going to go over in this video, but in that is going to be a little bit more of an in-depth discussion as to what that speed-strength continuum actually is. Okay, so at the start of this discussion, what we first need to do is kind of define the terms that we're going to be using throughout the discussion, okay? So the first thing we're going to define is strength. What is strength, okay? So strength is your ability to voluntarily produce force under certain conditions, okay? Now, when people think about strength, a lot of times the only thing that they think about is like that powerlifting style, maybe Olympic weightlifting style, maybe bodybuilders, that like really heavy, slow, grinding style of strength, like when you would do a 1-rep max in powerlifting. However, if you look at the definition, it's your ability to voluntarily produce force under certain conditions. And now those conditions are going to change depending on the skill that you're going to be demonstrating, the speed at which you're going to be moving, or the amount of repetitions that you're going to be performing in that movement, okay? So strength is your ability to voluntarily produce force, okay? So this is going to be really important to set up the base for our discussion. So strength is your ability to voluntarily produce force. So that means in every movement, there is some form of strength production, because everything that we do in sports or in the gym involves some form of force production. Okay? Now, on the other side of that, on the other side of the continuum, we have speed. So we need to kind of define what speed is. That's a little bit easier and a little bit easier to grasp. That's simply like meters per second, how fast you're moving an implement yourself. And a lot of this is going to be based on how efficient you are at the skill and how excitable your nervous system is, okay? So speed is very easily just how fast you are moving. Now, strength and speed are very intertwined in everything that we really do in the gym or also on the sporting field, okay? And I'm going to kind of show you why that is here. So in order to do that, we're going to start in the middle of the continuum, okay? Now, the actual middle of the continuum is where the highest power output lies, and I'm going to show you that kind of right here, okay? So, I'm going to draw this all the way down here because that's just kind of how my drawing skills go. I'm the coach, not the artist here, okay? So, this middle, okay, is the theoretical middle, the theoretical maximum of power. Okay? So, theoretical maximum of power. Because the equation for power is, or one of them is, okay? So the equation for power is force times velocity, okay? Now, in this setting, or in a real-world setting, force and velocity are inversely related to each other. So that means when one goes up, the other goes down, okay? So that's why your maximum power output, theoretically, is right in the center, okay? So that would be, 50-50 for each. Again, okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So if force goes up, velocity goes down, and vice versa. Velocity goes up, and force goes down. So if you want the highest of both, you go right for the middle, okay? Now, referring back to the definitions that we used prior, or started out this discussion with, is that strength is your ability to voluntarily produce force, okay? And then speed is the velocity at which you move, okay? So in another way of looking at it is this. Is your strength times speed in a specific movement, okay? That part's super important to understand, okay? Your maximum power levels is your strength times your speed. That's going to lead to the most power, which is what every athlete wants, right? Power is your ability to demonstrate your strength quickly, okay? both of those are very intertwined. If you don't have any strength, then you can't demonstrate it quickly. If you have a lot of strength and can't move fast, well, then you still can't demonstrate it quickly, and you're not going to be very powerful. Now, as we talked about in the previous video, all of the movements that are going to be done in the gym or on the field are really then going to be a combination of that strength and that speed. And whether it's going to either fall on the strength-speed side of the continuum or the speed-strength side of the continuum is going to be determined by your emphasis. Is the weight that you're moving the most important? In which case, it's going to be something slow, grinding style, again, 1 rep max type style, really, really heavy. That's going to be strength-speed. Or if it's speed-strength, where you're trying to move something as fast as you can, you're doing a sled push, you're doing dynamic effort deadlifts, where it's going to be on the speed-strength side of the spectrum. Now, so again, now that we are kind of reminded about the relationship and why of those terms and kind of what they are, one thing you have to realize is, again, those terms are worded or kind of structured how they are on purpose, okay? Like in the other video, we talk about your emphasis determining whether a movement is strength-speed or speed-strength, okay? However, it's not just strength or it's not just speed. What matters is that there's actually a force component and a velocity component for all of the movements that you do, okay? And again, your emphasis, or whichever one is more important, helps you determine which one that movement, or which category that movement falls into, okay? But there still is that other aspect that you need to take into consideration, okay? So, if you look at this strength-speed movement, again, 1 rep max back squat, okay? For example, the bar is still moving the whole time, okay? Even if it's really, really slow, okay? So while the emphasis is on the strength, the emphasis is on the force, okay, that's being produced in the movement, the speed is still a component, even though it's really little, okay? Or it could be really little, again, depending on if it's actually 1 rep max or vice versa, or whatever, okay? So, the opposite is also true for speed strength, okay? So while the speed, okay, the speed is the most important in the movement, there is still a strength component to all those movements because there is force being produced, okay? Again, strength is your ability to voluntarily produce force, okay? So now that we've kind of got that middle explained, we get to go to either ends, okay? But before I explain why, your max speed is genetic, I have to kind of explain to you what max strength is so we can kind of understand that other aspect too. Okay, so max strength, again, these words are chosen very specifically, okay, for a specific reason. It's not max strength speed, okay? It's max strength. So in order for something to be max strength, that means, not max strength speed, max strength, there has to be no velocity to it, okay? What's really one of the only ways that you can do this, and we talked about it in the other video too. Max strength or max strength can really be measured by a maximum level isometric, okay? Because this is however much force that you can produce, okay, without any speed component to it, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Again, it's not called max strength speed when it's on this side of the continuum, okay? It's called max strength, okay? If there's no speed component to it, the only thing or the only way that it could be measured is through an isometric movement, okay? And that's done in the lab actually a lot. It's force plates. It's an overcoming isometric where you push, pull, or squat against an immovable bar that you literally can't move, but it can provide a force output reading, okay? This is one of the a pretty solid way of measuring your maximum strength ability, how hard you can actually pull on something without it moving. Okay. Again, once the bar that you're moving, or once the bar that you're pulling or pushing on starts to move, all of this, then there becomes a speed component to it, and it's not max strength anymore. It becomes strength speed because what you're doing is moving. Okay, so now that we have that all kind of discussed and figured out, now we get to finally go over to the max speed side of the continuum and figure out why your max speed is entirely determined by your genetics. Okay, so when we talked about the max strength side, we talked about how it has to be as much force or however much force that you can produce without there any motion happening, okay? Because once that bar starts to move, or once things start to move, it becomes strength speed, okay? So what can there be that is max speed without any force production component, okay? Because if there was force production happening, it's not just max speed anymore, it's speed strength, okay? Because there's both of those components happening in that movement, okay? So here's your answer. The answer is going to be reaction time, okay? And now, there's two parts to reaction time that are super, super important, okay? The first part is your response, or it's the second part, but I'm going to explain that part first, is your response time, okay? So the actual, a stimulus happens, and actually how quick you are in responding to that stimulus. You know, it's the gun going off in a track meet, how quick you actually take your first step. It's, you know, a whistle being blown in lacrosse and how quick you kind of get that, you know, get the ball on a face-off or something like that, you know, things that are very clearly based on your reaction time and your movement, okay? But even that's not it, because once that movement takes place, a force production is happening now, and that means, so that first step on the, during the race, off the whistle, off the gun, that's still strength speed, or I'm sorry, speed strength, because while it's still your emphasis is how fast you're moving, once those muscles are in motion, that step is happening, a strength component has been initiated, okay? So that makes even that first step speed strength, okay? So if even that first part or that second part of reaction time isn't in, what is it, okay? Well, it's actually the first part of reaction time, okay? So like I said, reaction time is split up into two phases, okay? The first phase is called the latency phase, and then the second phase is the phase that I just went over, which is the response phase, okay? So, the latency phase, okay, is the time it actually takes for the electrical signal to travel down your nerves into, and then exhibit an action potential and exhibit or to send a signal to start muscular contraction, okay? So it's the physical time period that can actually be measured that this signal takes, the electrical signal takes to travel from your brain and your spinal cord, your central nervous system, to initiate movement in your muscles, okay? Now, that happens before muscular contraction actually occurs, okay? So that is the only way that you can actually have maximum speed without any sort of force component happening. Because once you get into that response time portion of reaction time, it becomes speed strength again, okay? So, your max speed is the only thing that makes sense for a max speed component is the latency phase in your reaction time, okay? And that has been shown to be majorly determined by your genetics, okay? Now it can help, like, depending on how recovered you are, depending on like your diet, like for example, if you're low on sodium, actually you won't be able to transmit signals down your nerves as efficiently, or other electrolytes, because those are super important to conduct the electrical signals down into your body. But latency latencycy so, but other than that, it's pretty much entirely determined by your genetics, okay? How the response time and reaction time can actually be really trained, okay? So if you continue to train, you again, say you're a track athlete and you're working on just your reaction time off the gun. Well, that can almost be shown to be even cut in half or more by actually training to react to a stimulus, okay? So the gun goes off, you can take a lot of time off of you actually initiate or actually taking that first step by training that response time. But the time it actually takes for the electrical signal to travel down into your muscles before you take that first step is determined by your genetics, and that's the only thing that is max speed without any force production. So, why all this gloom and doom? Why telling you that basically you're shit out of luck and you can't get any faster and you can't get any better at a sport and you might as well quit and go home. The people who are going to be the best are the best. Sorry you aren't it. Well, that's not really what I'm saying. We can obviously train to actually get faster, and we do that all the time, okay? We can do things like we can teach you how to put more force into the ground by developing your strength, by getting you stronger. We can continue to strengthen tendons and ligaments through plyometric actions and supplemental exercises so they can get better at transmitting force into the ground. We can teach you how to run more efficiently so you're not wasting as much energy. We can get your core stronger. So again, kind of like your tendons and ligaments, it doesn't disperse energy that you're putting into the ground and kind of result in those energy leaks. So we can actually train you to get faster, and you can train to actually get faster into practical application. Honestly, it's just kind of fun to go down this rabbit hole if you're into learning about strength and conditioning, because it allows you a deeper understanding of what these terms actually mean and how they could actually be applied in practical, or actually be applied through practice, because practice without theory is kind of useless, but also the same way, theory without practice is also useless. So not to say that you can't get better, you definitely can get better, and that's all what we should be doing. We should be training as hard as we can to try to reach our genetic potential. However, that is kind of one takeaway that could come with this, is that you have to reach your genetic potential, okay? There are going to be some people who are just naturally kind of won the genetic lottery, who have those, very fast conductivity or response times, that their nerves are just hardwired to work super efficiently so that they can contract and relax their muscles way more efficiently than somebody else. And they're naturally going to be faster. They might never train, but they might be faster anyways, okay? There'll always be that person, but there's not really anything that you can do about that. All you can do is control the things that you can control, and that is how you train and the effort that you put into training and try to be the best version of yourself, okay? So, kind of fun just to go down this theoretical strength and conditioning rabbit hole. It's more for me because I really like talking about this stuff. I just kind of like talking about it in general so I can get my thoughts in order also. So let me know what you think, and go try to get faster even though you might not be able to.